Our call to worship today is written by Reverend Barbara Peskin. One of the old ones stood up in the morning light and spoke to those who had come back to the river. Now, we have come again to this place. It is a good thing. My life apart from you is not as strong. Yes, I have danced, and I have told the stories at my own fire, and I have sung to all the 6 directions. But when I am with you, my friends, I know better who it is in me that sings. Is that right? Thank you. Pay no attention. Welcome.
Whoever you are, wherever you are from, you are welcome here. Please join in singing our welcome song. We are many, we are one. The light of the world is within you. Sacred and worthy is your soul. A place has been made for you. Oh, we are traveling down the Colorado River, and we are singing a Colorado River song. Yes, we are paddling down the Colorado River, and we are singing a Colorado River song. In our little canoe, just me and you, under a sky so blue, what a wonderful view. Yes, we are paddling down the Colorado River, and we are singing a Colorado River song. Real tight if you play your game right, and we'll be traveling down the Colorado River, and we'll be singing a Colorado River song. Yeah, we'll be singing a Colorado River song. Yes, we'll be singing a Colorado River song.
Unitarian. My name is Lena McCain, and I am the Youth Programs Coordinator here at FUSD. And for our Time for All Ages, I am going to invite our young and young at heart to go ahead and stay in your seats, or if you really want to come up front, but I don't have any pictures today, so I'm going to ask everyone to go ahead and turn on their imagination. Might need to close your eyes, Get into your body. Cool. The story I'm gonna read today is called The Stream. It's a Sufi story. A stream from its course in the far-off mountains, passing through every kind and description of countryside, at last reached the sands of the desert. Just as it had crossed every other barrier, the stream tried to cross this one, but found that as fast as it ran into the sand, its waters disappeared. It was convinced, however, that its destiny was to cross this desert, and yet there was no way. Now, a hidden voice coming from the desert itself whispered, "The wind crosses the desert, and so can the stream." The stream objected that the wind could fly, and this was why it could cross the desert. By hurtling in your own accustomed way, you cannot get across. You will either disappear or become a marsh. You must allow the wind to carry you over to your destination. But how could this happen? By allowing yourself to be absorbed in the wind. This idea was just not acceptable to the stream. After all, it had never been absorbed before. It did not want to lose its individuality. And once having lost it, how was one to know that one's identity could ever be regained? The wind, said the sand, performs this function. It takes up water, carries it over the desert, and then lets it fall again. But how can I know that this is true? It is so. And if you do not believe it, you cannot become more than a quagmire. But can I not remain the same stream that I am today? You cannot, in either case, remain so. The whisper said. When it heard this, echoes began to arise in the thoughts of the stream. Dimly, it remembered a state in which it, or some part of it, had been held in the arms of a wind. And the stream raised its vapor into the welcoming arms of the wind, which gently and easily bore it upwards and along, letting it fall softly as rain once then reached the roof of a mountain many, many miles away, where it then became a river. Please join me in singing our children out to class.
We hold you in our love as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious lives, we hold you in our love as you go. Please stand as you are willing and able and join us in singing There is a River Flowing in My Soul. I don't think the number's right on the sheet. It's in the teal hymnal, and it's page 1007. But it's possible there's words up here, and it's really easy even if you don't have the music. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river soul.
Good morning. I'm Eddie Carroll, and I have the honor of serving on the Board of Trustees here at First Unitarian Church. The words I share with you today for the offertory are from Suzanne Ensweiler. Imagine yourself on a wide, flowing river in a small boat. You are one little speck of being in a wide expanse of water, bordered by rocky cliffs, towering trees, and bright blue skies. Ahead of you are boulders and white water rapids, but also calm pools and sandbars for picnics. Around you are other little specks of being, each one a person isolated in their own small boat, just like you. But together, all of you form a flotilla, and you will journey down the river together, guiding each other around the boulders, rescuing each other out of the white water, enjoying the calm of the still pools and picnics on the sandbars. May your journey through life be the same, surrounded by friends and loved ones who will sustain you, rejoice with you in good times, until you reach the shore. Blessed be. I share those words to you today because I imagine for many of you, First Unitarian here is one of those small, calm pools or the sandbar where we're having picnics together. The only way that pool stays or that sandbar stays is through the generosity and support that you give First Unitarian. So as the collection plates come down, I invite you to be generous. And if you're at home, I invite you to follow the normal process online to make a contribution. Thank you.
Gonna find me a dying river, strike a deal with her and say, I'll fold you in two and I'll carry you away to a place where your headwaters will flow clean through to your mouth. In return, I'll request a small sanctuary by our banks where we'll live with our small family. She will water our garden and clean the dirt from our skin. As the world clamors at our door, we will dance and not let them in. And if one day we wake up to a bed dry as bone, find our river gone, find our sanctuary gone, we will stand and take stock and be grateful for what we've not lost. We will pack up our bags, pack our small family, head across the valley to where the aspen trees shiver as they ascend, the green hills rising blue. And at the edge of the chopping we'll bid a bit fond adieu. And all that I know to be true is the touch of your hand on my skin. One look from you can so easily soothe all the turmoil within. As we dance cheek to cheek with our feet so completely locked in a time all our own, I stop to speak but you gently keep me moving in time to the song. And in a voice that is sloppy with gin, you say, let the world spin. I'm gonna find me a dying river, strike a deal with her, I'll say. I'll fold you in two and I'll carry you away to a place where your headwaters will flow clean through to your mouth. And in return I'll request a small sanctuary by our banks where we'll live with our small family. She will water our garden and clean the dirt from our skin. And as the world clambers at a door, we will dance and not let them in.
Your gifts this morning, freely offered, are gratefully received. Thank you for your contributions, your gifts to support the life and ministry of this congregation. I just want to note at this moment, and this is not a request for more money. This is, I just want to acknowledge and note that we're an organization. We have a payroll, we have vendors, we have bills to pay, we have all manner of things, and all of that happens here at First Unitarian because of our volunteers. So I want to just invite and thank the people behind the scenes, the volunteers who kind of manage the money. So if you've served on the Stewardship Council, if you've served on the Finance Council, if you've been one of our treasurers or assistant treasurers, if you've helped out with one of our capital campaigns or pledge campaigns, would you just stand up briefly and let us acknowledge and thank you for what you do? Thank you. We have wonderful and talented people. I assure you, I do not pay the bills. Our prayer this morning, and I invite you into a spirit of meditation, reflection, or prayer. Our prayer this morning is lightly adapted from the great Maya Angelou. A rock, a river, a tree, host to species long since departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur, who left dried tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. Across the wall of the world, a river sings a beautiful song. It says, "Come, rest here by my side. Each of you a bordered country, delicate and strangely made proud. Yet thrusting perpetually under siege, your armed struggles for profit have left collars of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast, yet today I call you to my riverside. If you will study war no more, come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave me when I and the tree and the rock were one. Before cynicism was a bloody sear across your brow, and when you yet knew, you still knew nothing. The river sang and sings on. Here, root yourselves beside me. I am that tree planted by the river which will not be moved. I am yours. Your passages have been paid. Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon this day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it in the palms of your hands. Mold it in the shape of your most private need. Sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each new hour holds new chances for a new beginning. Don't be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. Here, on the pulse of this fine day, you may have the courage to look up and out and upon me, the rock, the river, the tree, your country. No less to Midas than the mendicant, no less to you now than the mastodon then. Here, on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. Just take a moment and welcome Adam Revelle back to our sanctuary. So whether you know it or not, you have almost certainly eaten minute portions of the Grand Canyon. And that's because you have almost certainly eaten vegetables that were grown in the Imperial Valley of Southern California, which supplies about 90% of winter vegetables in the United States. And that's because the soil of the Imperial Valley is very rich from millions of years of sediment left by the Colorado River, deposited over 200 feet below sea level in the geologic region known as the Salton Sink, an ancient lake bed roughly 60 miles west of where the lower Colorado River used to pass into Mexico and out to the Gulf of California. For millions of years, the Colorado would periodically overflow its banks and flood the Salton Sink, making and remaking occasional lakes there, which would sometimes linger for a couple hundred years. And all the while, many miles upstream, that same river was slowly carving out the Grand Canyon, carrying the silt and sediments downstream. It is fun and wondrous. Awesome, actually, like in the original sense of the word awesome, before we used to use it for things like pizza. It is awesome, actually, to imagine the mighty Colorado River before all the dams and diversions. In the largest sense, imagine a great shallow basin covering a vast expanse of the western United States. From the Wind River Range in Wyoming to the north, bounded by the Continental Divide on the east, bounded on the west by gradually rising land as you cross Utah, Nevada, southern Idaho, heading southward to include the entire state of Arizona, including a slice of New Mexico and a slice of California and a chunk of northern Mexico, this vast, shallow basin. Every single river, stream, every spring in that vast basin once flowed into the Colorado. Every one of them. Tributaries to the Colorado include the Roaring Fork, the Dolores, the Gunnison, the Green, and Yampa rivers. Farther south, it takes in the Little Colorado, the San Juan, the San Pedro, the Salt, the Gila, and the Virgin rivers. The Colorado travels 1,450 miles from high country, alpine meadows, through canyons of jaw-dropping beauty, through some of the most desolate deserts on the continent, and it used to end in about 3,000 to 4,000 square miles of wetland river delta, teeming with fish, forests, mangroves, and waterfowl. The smaller scale is no less awesome. Edward Abbey, the great bard of the Southwest, once described Glen Canyon like this. These are his words. In and along the river were sandbars, beaches, willow groves, and glades of cottonwood. And the innumerable grottos, caves, arches, amphitheaters, coves, and side canyons along the way, so aptly named by Powell and his men. Cathedral in the desert, music temple, hidden passage, dungeon canyon, forbidden canyon, to name just a few. Up these side canyons were great natural bridges, like Gregory Bridge, now submerged, and countless pools, streams, waterfalls, springs, and seeps. Everything was full of life. Not only deer and lion, but also fox, beaver, coyote, bighorn frogs, gopher snakes, great horned owls, great blue herons, wood ibis, killdeer, sandpipers, and red-tailed hawks. Plus the ancient human history of the canyon, the hundreds of ruins, granaries, shelters, and villages left by the Anasazi, the priceless rock art of pictograph and petroglyph. All this you could have known in Glen Canyon, plus a scenic grandeur equal to, though quite different from, Grand Canyon or Desolation Canyon or Hell's Canyon or Big Bend. All this plus the sweetness and adventure and wonder of unspoiled wilderness. All this and much, much more. Glen Canyon is, of course, underwater now, thanks to the Glen Canyon Dam, which is but one story of how humans have tamed the once mighty Colorado River. The story I want to tell, though, is the one I started with. Some of this richest farmland in North America is in Imperial Valley. The only problem is that in summertime, temperatures reach about 125 degrees, and there's no water. They get about 3 inches of precipitation per year, not all at once. So it gets its water from the Colorado River through a series of dams, canals, and spillways that transport the lower Colorado River the roughly 60-ish miles further west from its natural course. You may know that the Colorado River has not been draining into the Gulf of California for about 40 years now, partially from the effects of climate change, but mostly because of overuse and drainage of the river itself. Further north from Imperial Valley, but still in the Great Salton Sink, lies the Salton Sea, a massive human-caused environmental disaster area, a geologic bowl with no outflow. Hundreds of square miles of fetid water in a desert wasteland contaminated with pesticides, salt, invasive algae, and chemical runoff from agriculture, mining, and leaching. So in 1901, the first canal from the river to the uninhabited Salton Sink was dug, and it was an unqualified success. In just a couple of years, farms and towns sprung up, 5,000 people had moved in, trainloads of crops were shipping out. Tomatoes, cantaloupe, lettuce, grapes, wheat, and more. In just 4 years, the valley went from empty and dry to over 120,000 acres of land under cultivation. 120,000 acres. Everyone was happy. From the landowners to the laborers to the railroad companies that had funded the canal and were now happy to transport cash crops both east and west. But they had underestimated the Colorado. 1905 was a particularly wet year for the upper Colorado, which meant that when the water got to the lower Colorado, levels rose, the levee breached, and just like the Colorado River had been doing, from time immemorial, water flowed downhill into the Salton Sink. What started as a 6-foot break in a dam eventually grew to over a quarter of a mile wide. The river took advantage of the newly dug canals until nearly the entire flow of the Colorado River was barreling down into the Salton Sink instead of out to the sea. It flooded the fields, it overran the roads, washed away 90% of the town of Mexicali and most of El Centro. 6 times over the next 2 years, engineers and railroads spent millions of dollars to try to build dams to stop this flow, and 5 times the Colorado just washed it all away. They exhausted every stone quarry and source of timber pilings for 500 miles in every direction, eventually shipping in lumber all the way from New Orleans and boulders and sand from central Mexico. The bottom of the Salton Sink, the lowest part, became a lake again, eventually becoming the largest lake in California, over 500 square miles, 70 feet deep. By the time they finally got the Colorado River back into its own channel and headed towards the ocean again, they had reshaped the land and created a whole new industry and a labor force to work that industry. Skilled dam builders were in high demand for the next 40 years, and they traveled out across the country. You might know that Denver gets a little over half its water from the Colorado River. You drink it every day. They get this through a series of tunnels, pumps, reservoirs, and canals that bring the water over and through the mountains. You might know that the western slope of the Continental Divide is where 80% of Colorado's water comes from. But the eastern slope of the Continental Divide is where 80% of the water gets used. This pattern continues over the whole length of the Colorado River. Other cities that draw large amounts of their water and electricity from the Colorado River include Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Tucson, San Diego, Los Angeles, Albuquerque, and Tijuana, along with dozens of smaller municipalities and 11 American Indian reservations. Some of those cities, like Las Vegas, Phoenix, even Denver, just simply would not exist in their current form without Colorado River water. Would not exist. There are 15 dams along the length of the Colorado, which means, if you do the math, that the Colorado River is dammed on average more than once every 100 miles for all of its almost 1,500 mile length. But the main draw is agriculture. In 6 different states, 70% of Colorado River water gets pumped or drained into crop production through a series of complex treaties, laws, interstate and international agreements. Turns out that governing, regulating, and divvying up the Colorado River is a whole industry to itself. And all of this is, at least to me, pretty fascinating. And beautiful, and sad, and enormously complex, politically, legally, morally. You could study these and many related issues for a lifetime, and people do. But I'd like to move in a different direction and move towards a conclusion by making a few observations. Maybe see if there's some wisdom to be gathered from the Colorado River and its many stories. And I'm going to begin with one of my old friends and mentors, the great bard of the American desert, Edward Abbey. When someone once observed there wasn't enough water in the desert, Edward Abbey replied by reframing the issue. Not true, he said. Not true. In fact, there is exactly the right amount of water in the desert. There is precisely the right amount of water in the desert in relation to the stone and the cactus and the ocotillo, the canyons, the sagebrush, the coyote, snakes, and assorted bugs who live there. It's only when you build cities that consume 100 million gallons a day, that's when you have a shortage of water in the desert. For sure, one of the great lessons of the Colorado River is to live within the means that are given to us. For sure. I'm not suggesting we abandon all the farms and homes and businesses that rely on the Colorado River. That is some 35 million people in 6 states and in Mexico. But I'll tell you, the more you learn about the Colorado River and how dependent we have become on it and how vulnerable is the lifeblood of those 35 million people, including us, the more obvious it becomes that we need a serious reframing when it comes to how we make decisions about building cities and how many people we can feed and what has lasting as opposed to only fleeting value. What we are doing now is simply, just factually, unsustainable. Like they say in Game of Thrones, right? Winter's coming. Not only do you have the problems of shortage when you overuse, you also have unintended consequences. And there are many examples all up and down the Colorado River. For instance, like no single one of those 15 dams or the dozens of diversions of the Colorado intended to dry up 3,000 square miles of river delta wetlands, erasing a unique habitat that had supported wildlife for 6 million years, and the indigenous people who lived there for about 12,000 years, causing changes in bird migration patterns that are measurable from the Arctic Circle to the tip of South America. But the sum of all those actions did all that and more. As John Muir wrote in 1915, when one tugs at a single string in nature, you find it attached to the rest of the world. Another observation. Some other wisdom to be gathered from the Colorado River is some awareness of time. The Colorado has been doing its thing for 5 or 6 million years, which is roughly about the time that our ancient, hairy, ape-like ancestors first stood up on 2 legs on the plains of Africa. Long before language, roughly twice as old as the oldest primitive stone tools. That means that the past 120 years of human intervention on the Colorado River is like nothing to the Colorado River. It's nothing at all. Like a single snapshot in a long and storied life, a moment that has come and surely will just pass. The river does not care about human timelines or supply chains. It does not care about our need for electricity or tomatoes or golf courses or motorboats or even flushing toilets. Does not care. And if we all disappeared tomorrow, it would only be a couple hundred years before all those dams and diversions would just be washed away again like sand. The river goes on. I'd like to suggest that perspective is worthy of our spiritual reflection on our current lives and on our collective lives. Like, just what are we doing with our one wild, precious, very fleeting life? Put it in perspective. That's a great lesson of the river. You and me, here in our time, with our own precious resources of time and energy and love and freedom, like, just what are we doing? What are you doing? What am I doing? And moving further into metaphor, you know I love a good metaphor. Just like the Colorado was once wild and free, I like to think each of us was born wild and free, full of potentials for amazing things, sometimes deep, sometimes wide, sometimes falling headlong over cliffs, sometimes meandering through canyons of astonishing beauty, bringing nourishment, life-giving attention to innumerable living things, always headed for our final union with the sea. And just like the Colorado River is under enormous pressure from states and people and municipalities, farmers, industry, and more, I would observe that you and I are also under enormous, unrelenting pressure. 24/7, 365 days a year to conform, to consume, to follow along, to forget who we are. As I like to sometimes say, we are under enormous, unrelenting pressure to live lives of fantastic superficiality. Amen? And this is the truth, but it's not wisdom. And I'm going to close with some wisdom. Chapter 8 of the Tao Te Ching. The highest goodness resembles water, which benefits myriad things without contention. It fills the low places from the bottom up, and therefore it is like the Tao. In dwelling, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present. When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everyone will respect you. Amen. And may it be so.
join us in singing our closing affirmation. And please remain standing for the benediction.
Our benediction today, again from Maya Angelou, here on the pulse of this new day. May you have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning. Our service is ended. Go in peace.